Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report, joining us now, and I got to tell him this because he just seems to sort of just float through life. David Dayen, executive editor of the American Prospect, co-host of the Organized Money podcast. David, welcome back. You're on the Majority Report. It's me, Sam Seder, and Emma Vigeland. I don't know if you remember.
Wait, David,
Hello,
you're David
all.
Day Tan now. Look at that tan. Have you been out in the sun? No?
I think you actually need to fix the color balance on your,
damn it.
Exactly.
All right.
your-
Well.
on your
Dayen
thing
just
there.
knows how to.
Raining
yes,
right now. In,
Yeah.
Oh, well, good. That's good.
David Dayen does not go outside.
Sorry.
He needs to have his computer plugged in at every time.
I am a bit of an indoor-outdoor creature. We have
This meeting
we have
every human
laptops.
being.
I can go outside anytime I want.
Yeah, but that
This
doesn't mean
is
you do.
bolted to my lap. I can spend that moment outside.
David, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but give me your sense. I want to take your general temperature right now because you certainly knew about Project 2025, the heart of which was a deconstruction of the administrative state, the Schedule F with getting rid of the civil servants. We knew Russell Vought was talking about, traumatizing federal workers. Don't think that too many people anticipated this. I think Musk's role in this.
Yeah, I mean, he got involved in the campaign fairly late. It really wasn't even until the assassination attempt of Trump that he even endorsed Trump for president. And that was in, July, I believe. So we're really talking about 6 months ago. This guy wasn't even on board as an endorser. And then $280 million later, he becomes sort of the chief financial backer, and he parlays that into a co-presidency or shadow presidency or whatever you want to call it.
Let me just also say this. I think that it had less to do with the assassination attempt and the appointment of J.D. Vance, because Musk came in with this money. And I think that, the assassination attempt may have pushed up the.
I'm not saying that was a trigger. I'm saying
right.
I'm just using it as a marker. That
Right.
was the time period in which this happened. And, Project 2025 by that point had been out for 6 months to a year. So, there was this blueprint of how take the steps to essentially radically overturn the government. But the Musk aspect of it, I saw a good comment that I forget who said it, but that we're all now feeling like what it's like when a private equity company comes in and takes over your firm. This is what it feels like. And so the Musk version of this is providing that aspect of it, the sort of shock and awe of how you terrorize a professional workforce.
And he's also, his ability to do so is, it seems to me, to be grounded in the disciplining of Republican senators in a way that I think no one else can. I mean, we've seen it, I think people are surprised about Cassidy, voting for RFK or Jody Ernst voting for Pete Hegseth. I mean, they may or may not have done this, but the idea of the world's wealthiest man saying, I'm just going to drop what is the functional equivalent of like when you drop a quarter as you're walking down the street on making you lose.
And Cassidy already is a
primary.
challenger, right? Because of he voted for impeachment.
Yeah, I mean, it's more than that. It's the combination of having this extreme amount of political power because he's been granted it by the president. He has this financial power because he's the world's richest man, and he has media power because of his ownership and how he has transformed X into an organization that can rally up thousands of shock troops to make life miserable on anyone he trains his eye on. So, we haven't had those three things combined in one person. I don't know that there is many antecedents. The only antecedent I've used is like Silvio Berlusconi in Italy, who was a big media owner and the richest man in Italy and the the prime minister. That I don't see another kind of antecedent to what Musk has in terms of those multivaried, forces of power.
Bloomberg had a little bit of that in New York. There was a lot of he would spread a lot of his money around to sort of grease the wheels as mayor. But there was an opposition to him that could be mounted because people he wasn't sort of so flagrantly, he wasn't flagrantly breaking the laws in the way that it appears Musk is doing. Let's just start with that, and then we'll get on the various responses. I want to first start just you've written a couple of pieces about this over the past couple of days. Is there anything legal about what he's doing? We can take the USAID as a starting point, because I think that's a model for what we're going to see with other agencies, but also going into Treasury and having what seems like unfettered access to both the mechanism in which payments are made and also the data as to whom and how much.
Yeah, the payment system aspect is obviously the most dangerous and chilling thing that is going on right now. I know that you on Monday talked to Nathan Tankus, and I did as well. And I published an interview with him. Obviously, I believe the quote he used with me is, "I'm filled with unmitigated terror ever since I learned about this." And that's the real dangerous thing, not necessarily just because of what Musk can do with that power, but because of all the ways that any misstep could backfire spectacularly. So it's not just that, yes, if you have access to the payment system, you could, in theory, stop an individual payment or stop a payment from an entire agency that you don't like. It's more that you can put in one line of code that ends up being malicious and ruin the smooth functioning of payments that go out to the tune of 1.4 billion a year. And what we're learning about the way the federal government disperses grants, because the OMB kind of did this, right? They put a pause through an order that was then challenged in court successfully and revoked. But just that turning of the off and on switch has caught up people who for several days now still can't get the funding that they were entitled to. And what we're learning is that just a small gap in those appropriations has absolutely dire consequences. So I have seen exhibits put in some of these cases against the payment freeze that talk about, hey, we're a little organization in West Virginia that helps disabled people get to the doctor. And because we're not allowed to have a reserve of funds, we don't get a year's worth of pay in our grant from the federal government. We get it 3 days at a time. Because we lost that spigot, we have to lay off half our staff. And we're seeing that in microcosm across, thousands of agencies. And so if you think about that and then think about the plumbing of how those payments go out, and if that's corrupted, then you multiply that by millions and people don't get the Social Security checks, people don't get their tax refunds, people don't get, all sorts of things where they have short-term needs for that money. That's absolutely catastrophic.
Okay, so that's the and I think we called it the 5 alarm plus fire that is there, because it's almost like the Cuban Missile crisis on some level. There's both what both sort of players want to do or not want to do, and then there's also like anything could go wrong in that instance. Then there is the sort of like, I'm seeing a story on Politico today that as of Monday, a lot of nonprofits and state agencies didn't have access to the EPA grant awards funded through the IRA.
So this is really important. So because we're focusing a lot on like this commandeering of the payment system, we're focusing a lot on the OMB freeze, which now has been, there's temporary restraining orders, actually 2 temporary restraining orders by federal judges. But this ongoing stuff that you're talking about, which was put into executive orders, there was one that said terminating the Green New Deal, for example. So a lot of grantees that were funded through the IRA and through bipartisan infrastructure law aren't getting that money. There's the continuing foreign aid pause that we're seeing. And there are other pauses that were in executive orders. Those constitute illegal delays of funds that Congress formally appropriated and passed a law signed by the president to get that money out. And that is an ongoing violation of the Constitution and the power of the purse that is situated within the Congress. It's a violation of the Impoundment Control Act, which says if you, as the president, want to delay or rescind certain funding that was passed by Congress, there are very specific steps that you have to take in order to do that. And some of that spending is off limits to you. You're not even allowed to rescind or delay it. But if you do rescind or delay it, you're time limited. You have to state a specific purpose, et cetera. And it also violates several Supreme Court rulings that have said the Impoundment Control Act is perfectly legal, and presidents have no authority and no power to simply cancel spending they don't like. So that is an ongoing crisis that's almost been put into the background because of some of these other crises.
Well, and we have now 2 or 3 circuit judges who have ruled on this. And it seems like we're in that one of those situations where it's like, you and what army?
Yeah, I mean, they've ruled on the OMB pause. Let's be clear.
Right.
The 2 restraining orders that we have are on this blanket pause on all grants and loans, right? Those are in effect, even though it looks like some agencies, some grantees have not been able to get their money, particularly Head Start programs, dozens of them.
So the freeze on the IRA is a separate freeze from the blanket OMB.
It's a separate freeze that derives its alleged authority from an executive order. And
so who has,
to my knowledge, nobody has yet challenged that disbursement of funds. Some of this is because there is a little bit of wiggle room. If you're saying it's a programmatic delay, it's just a delay of funding, there's a time limit. There's 45 days before you have to get that through. And we're not at that point yet. So that could be one reason that we haven't seen that. But it remains illegal, even because there are very specific steps for a delay of funding under the Impoundment Control Act. If you want to delay funding as the president to something that's been passed by Congress, that you, for whatever reason, decide to delay it, it has to be under very specific, very strict reasons, and policy has nothing to do with it.
Right. It can't be you don't like the idea of it. It has to be that the money's not getting there for some reason. It has to be sort of more mechanical or technical issues.
There are 3 reasons, and I'm not remembering them exactly right now, but none of them have to do with policy.
But
And
oh, sorry, David, go on. You
no, go
mentioned
ahead.
Head Start, and I'm just wondering if you could expand on that and tell some people in the audience may not know what that program is, but that was one of the ones most affected. I was talking to somebody whose kid is in Head Start, freaking out. The teachers didn't know if they should even come in. Like how that program's been
Yeah.
affected.
I mean,
Yeah.
Head Start is a program that provides essentially a version of early daycare for children pre-kindergarten. And those programs are typically grant funded. There's not like one national Head Start program. It's thousands of little agencies, little nonprofits that do that work, and they get paid by the federal government through the sort of broader Head Start program. But it's a grant that's given to them on an ongoing basis, and so. They are among the thousands and thousands and thousands of entities who had those payments frozen by OMB, only to have that order rescinded. But this is about plumbing in some ways. They turned off the spigot, right? They turned off the switch, and then they turned it back on again. But it's not so easy once you turn it back on to make sure that every grantee they basically go through a computer program and say, I need this money to pay such and such bill, and then that money is distributed to them. Once you turn that thing down and turn it back on again, there can be glitches, there can be delays.
There's no button for, hey, we skipped 2 days of payments and now go back in time and issue those payments, because they're all scheduled to be on the third, Tuesday of the month. We make this payment. There's no way to just we have that problem, when we just do HR for our tiny show. Like if, honestly, It's like, hey, you guys need to take a car home. We can't run that through our payment system. It's just got to be, we don't have a way of doing that.
Exactly. And in a broader sense, this is why it's so dangerous to muck around the Treasury Department's payment system. Because what we're talking about with this OMB thing is that there was an order made to stop payments, right? And every agency dealt with that somewhat differently. And that's why we're having these problems. But if you're saying at the source, because the Bureau of the Fiscal Service, the Treasury's payment system, is sort of an intermediary of an intermediary, right? I mean, the agencies say, you, such and such an entity gets money, and then they basically go to Treasury and say, give them this money, and then there's a system within Treasury that does the mechanics. So, it's one thing to have a problem at the agency level, which can be fixed, and eventually it will be, but right now these Head Start programs and many other programs are having a tough time. It's another thing if the plumbing itself is corrupted. Then you're going to have a real problem because failing to fix that means that everybody's payments that they are rightfully due could be in question.
All right. Lastly, let's talk about the CFPB takeover. I noticed that Marco Rubio appointed himself acting head of USAID. And now we have Scott Bessent claiming that he is now acting head of the CFPB. And it seems like this was a premeditated strategy to get around the laws as to who becomes acting head of an agency when they are fired, particularly before their term is up. That sort of caught the first Trump administration up a little bit, because there were court cases. It seems like some type of workaround they found, and it is pretty messed up.
Pretty messed up. That's your technical opinion. This was done in the first term. So at some point, I believe it was November of 2017, Richard Cordray, that's his name. Richard Cordray, the former director of the CFPB, resigned, and they made Mick Mulvaney, who was the head of the OMB at the time, simultaneously the director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And there was a big fight around this because at that time it wasn't clear that you could just make the head of another agency the acting director. There was a line of succession, and CFPB believed that another woman, I believe her name was Leandra English, who was the deputy director, would be the duly made director. There were lawsuits, and eventually they ruled in Trump's favor that yes, a Senate-confirmed appointee elsewhere in the government can become the head of CFPB for a temporary period of time. And so fast forward to 2025, in between there, the Supreme Court ruled that the president has the right to fire the head of the CFPB, which wasn't a right that Trump had. And actually, on the first day of Joe Biden's presidency, he fired Trump's head of the CFPB, who was later confirmed, and made Rohit Chopra the director. It took a couple weeks for Trump to get around to firing Rohit Chopra, and it was kind of an amusing couple weeks where Wall Street was like freaking out that they weren't going to fire Rohit Chopra, but eventually he did. And then using that power given by the Supreme Court, and then using power given by the courts previously, said, okay, Scott Bessent is now the head of the CFPB. And what did he do immediately? He said, essentially, stop all work, that CFPB cannot issue any new rulemakings. They can't finalize rulemakings. They can't get, make rulemakings effective. They can't do any enforcement. They can't do any litigation. In fact,
they're going to close down their court cases. Yeah,
active cases that were going on. They had to say, we need a continuance because we're not allowed to do anything. They can't even make public communications right now. So, I mean, I've talked to people at the CFPB and I'm like, what do you do all day? And they say, well, we can do supervision. We just can't actually enforce anything. We can sort of prepare reports. We just can't release them. So there's like a lot of kind of hurry up and wait going on at CFPB. And what we obviously expect is that at some point a director will be confirmed, and CFPB will go back to what it was under the first Trump term, which was essentially a get out of jail free card that it exercises its prosecutorial discretion to do not very much of anything.
Fantastic. Well,
but that almost is the legal version of all this other stuff.
Right.
Because we have because they pushed the envelope on this in 2017 and got the rulings necessary. There are other things out there like the neutering of the NLRB, for example, where Trump fired Gwynne Wilcox, who was one of the board commissioners, was serving, and made it so that there are only 2 members on the NLRB, which by law means they don't have a quorum and can't hear any cases. So it's like there's no appeals court, even though companies can appeal. So if there's an election and the union wins, a company can appeal, and it just goes into an ether, and there's just no decision until such time as there's a quorum on the board.
She just filed suit today, I think it was.
Yeah, I guess today she just sued. But what may be likely is that the NLRB's guidelines on the president not being able to fire a board member for cause or for any reason other than sort of as an at-will employee, that might go away, and it'll be similar to the CFPB where the president can just come in and fire board members who have fixed terms. So that is another situation where they're testing the legal bounds. I mean, so much of this is the president and Elon Musk sort of seeing what they can get away with.
Amazing. And we also have that similar dynamic at the EEOC. It doesn't have the same, I think, record of 90 years worth of this never happening, but it has basically rendered that commission inoperable. David Dayen, executive editor at the American Prospect, co-host of the Organized Money podcast. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. I just got
All right,
the hiccups.
take care of those hiccups.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.